Upadesh. In the educated society of Prayag, Pandit Devaratn Sharma was truly a gem. He had received a high level of education and belonged to an esteemed family. Age's government wanted to appoint him to a high position, but he didn't deem it fitting to sacrifice his freedom. Many of his well-wishing friends tried to explain that he shouldn't let this golden opportunity slip by. Government jobs are obtained only by great fortune. Many people long for such positions and leave this world hoping for them in vain. There is no easier way to elevate your family's name than through this. Consider it a divine tree. Wealth, property, respect, and fame all bow to this. As for serving the country, why should only you sacrifice yourself for the nation? This city has numerous scholars and wealthy men, who live comfortably in bungalows and ride around in cars, raising dust storms. Aren't they patriots? When needed or when the occasion arises, they dedicate themselves to serving the country. Just recently, during the municipal election dispute, cars were lined up in the Mayo Hall yard. Inside the building, there was an overwhelming display of national songs and speeches. But who among them has truly forsaken their personal interests? The rule of the world is that one lights a lamp at home before lighting one at the mosque. In reality, only college students should indulge in discussions about patriotism. Once you enter the real world, where is patriotism and where are the discussions of national service? This is how the world works, so why should you alone concern yourself with such matters? If one looks closely, a man in a government position can serve his countrymen better than in any other role. A kind police officer is better than 100 national servants. A just and devout magistrate can serve the nation more effectively than thousands of charitable nationalists. Therefore, it all comes down to one's inner drive. A person, no matter what their position, can always contribute to the nation's well-being. So, stop hesitating and accept the position quickly. Sharmaji couldn't find much merit in the other arguments, but the weight of this final point was undeniable. Yet, whether due to his principles or mere laziness which often gains prestige in such situations, he believed his well-being lay in remaining apart from employment. For this self-sacrifice, the college youth showered him with congratulations. A patriotic drama was staged on this act of self-conquest, with Sharmaji as the protagonist. His selflessness became a topic of discussion in high society, earning him significant fame. For several years, he immersed himself in national service. Most of this service was spent reviewing newspapers, which was considered an essential part of national service. In addition, he wrote articles for newspapers, organized gatherings, and delivered fiery speeches. Sharmaji was the secretary of the Free Library, the president of the Students' Association, the assistant secretary of the Social Service League, and the founder of the Primary Education Committee. He was passionate about agriculture. Whenever he read about new fertilizer or innovations in newspapers, he would immediately mark them with a red pencil and discuss them in his writings. However, even though he had a large village just outside the city, he wasn't familiar with any of his tenants. He had never even visited the government agricultural fields of Prayag. In the same neighborhood lived a man named Lala Babulal. He worked as a clerk for a lawyer, knew a little Urdu and Hindi, and managed to get by with that. He wasn't particularly handsome, and his long coat from the factory in Mao didn't help his appearance. He also wore local shoes, which sometimes, despite his efforts to maintain them with mustard oil, would bite back. Poor Babulal would spend 6 months of the year applying ointment to his feet. Often, he would walk barefoot to the court, though out of fear of being called stingy, he would carry his shoes in his hands. He owned a small piece of land in the village where Sharmaji had his estate, and this would occasionally give him a reason to visit Sharmaji. During holidays, he would go to his village. Sharmaji found his visits irritating, especially when Babulal would show up while fashionable guests were around. Babulal was so oblivious that he didn't realize how out of place he was. The biggest problem was that he would boldly sit on a chair, as if a crow among swans. The group would then switch to speaking in English, and Babulal would become the subject of their mockery, being called simple-minded, crazy, and foolish. Sometimes they made fun of him directly. Sharmaji was gracious enough to protect his thoughtless friend from outright disrespect as much as possible. In reality, Babulal held deep admiration for Sharmaji. After all, Sharmaji had a bar degree and was a patriot, making it natural for someone like Babulal, lacking in education, to see him as a revered figure. Once, there was an outbreak of plague in Prayag. The city's wealthy fled, while the poor died off like mice. Sharmaji too thought of leaving. However, being the secretary of the Social Service League, he feared the disgrace that would come with fleeing. So he sought an excuse. Most of the league's members were college students. He gathered them and expressed his thoughts with these words: "Friends, you are the torchbearers of our nation. In these dark times, who will we look to but you? Opportunities to serve the nation are rare blessings. Perhaps the Almighty has sent this plague to test you. Show the world that you possess the heart of a warrior, which remains unshaken even in the face of great challenges. Let it be known that the sacred land that produced Harishchandra and Bharat is still fertile. The nation whose youth harbors such compassion for their suffering brothers will forever bask in glory and honor. Come, let us gird our loins and enter the field of action. There's no doubt that the task ahead is challenging and daunting. You'll have to give up your leisure, your hockey, your tennis, and your time with Mill and Milton. You may hesitate, pull back, or turn away, but brothers, the heavenly joy of national service is not easily attained. If our strength, our willpower, and our bodies are not put to use for the nation, they are in vain. My ardent desire was to join you in this noble cause, but I have just received news that the disease is spreading to the villages. Therefore, I entrust this work to your capable hands and leave for the villages to serve my rural brothers. I trust you will wholeheartedly fulfill your duty to the motherland." Thus, having found a way out, Sharmaji arrived at the station in the evening. However, he felt somewhat downcast, ashamed of his cowardice and weakness. By chance, he met a lawyer friend at the station. This was the same lawyer in whose office Babulal worked. He too was fleeing. The lawyer asked, "Sharmaji, where are you off to? Are you running away?" Sharmaji felt deeply embarrassed, but quickly replied, "Why would I run?" The lawyer said, "The whole city is fleeing." Sharmaji responded, "I'm not that much of a coward." The lawyer smirked, "Why are you talking like this? Where are you going?" Sharmaji replied, "The disease is spreading to the villages. I'm going there to do some relief work." The lawyer laughed, "That's absolutely false. I just checked the district gazette. There's no mention of any outbreak outside the city." Sharmaji could have argued back but instead said, "You may consider the gazette to be the word of God, but I don't." The lawyer retorted, "You must have heard from the angels themselves, then? Why don't you just admit that you're running away out of fear for your life?" Sharmaji sighed, "Fine, let's assume that's true. What sin am I committing? Everyone values their life." The lawyer laughed again. "Ah, now you are speaking like a man. Protecting one's life is the first rule of scripture. But from now on, don't boast about patriotism. This work requires great fortitude and inner strength. Self-interest and patriotism are opposing forces. Those who die for their country earn the highest honor as national servants. But mere talk and writing in newspapers do not constitute national service. At least, I won't grant that title to those who merely read the papers. So, from now on, no more grand speeches, okay? You think everyone in the world is blinded by self-interest except yourself. That's why I'm telling you this." Sharmaji didn't respond to this insolence. He turned away in disgust and got into the train. At the third station, he got off. He was upset by the lawyer's harsh words. He wanted to slip away unnoticed, but the lawyer spotted him, laughed, and said, "What, has the plague reached your village too?" Sharmaji didn't answer and climbed into a carriage. Several workers were present. They lifted his luggage. It was the month of Fagun, and the soft breeze carried the fragrance of mango blossoms. Occasionally, the melodious call of the koel bird could be heard. In the fields, farmers were singing joyfully, intoxicated with happiness. But Sharmaji, overwhelmed with guilt, paid no attention to these delightful sights and sounds. After a while, he arrived at the village. Sharmaji's late father had been a man of taste. A small orchard, a modest brick well, a bungalow, and a temple dedicated to Lord Shiva, all of these were his legacy. He used to spend the summers here, but this was Sharmaji's first visit. The workers had cleaned everything thoroughly in anticipation of his arrival. Sharmaji got out of the carriage and went straight to the bungalow. Hundreds of tenants had come to pay their respects, but he didn't speak to any of them. By the time night fell, Sharmaji's servants had arrived with the horse-drawn carriage. The kahar, palanquin bearers, the sais, grooms, and the cook all treated the tenants as if they were their servants. The sais instructed a plump farmer to unharness the horse. The poor farmer, trembling with fear, approached the horse. As soon as the horse saw a stranger, it flared its ears and changed its posture. The farmer, frightened, backed away, and the sais pushed him aside, saying, "You are as useless as a calf's uncle. Does plowing fields drain all your wits? Here, take the reins and walk the horse. What are you so scared of? It's not a lion that'll eat you." The farmer, trembling with fear, grabbed the reins. His frightened face was almost comical. He kept glancing cautiously at the horse, as if it were a police officer ready to pounce. The cook, lying on a cot, barked, "Where's the barber? Come and bring water to wash my hands and feet." The kahar added, "Does anyone have some tobacco? I haven't had a smoke in a long time." The mukhtar, a state manager, arranged a feast for the guests. Puris were made for the sais and kahar, while the cook was given provisions. The mukhtar ran around following their orders, and as for the poor farmers, well, they were nothing more than slaves without pay. The truly free men of that time had become servants. Several days passed. Sharmaji stayed in his bungalow, reading newspapers and books, enjoying the company of kings and sages as Ruskin suggested. He pondered deep topics like agricultural laws in Holland, industry and commerce in America, and the education system in Germany. But who in the village was there for him to talk to? He wanted to converse with the farmers, but for some reason, those rough and uncouth people stayed away from him. Sharmaji's mind was filled with agricultural knowledge. He could speak at length about scientific farming in Holland and Denmark, the yield results, and cooperative banks, but what did these peasants know? All they did was bow down and avoid him, like people trying to steer clear of a mad bull. It's hard to say whether Sharmaji's desire to talk to them stemmed from genuine sympathy or a need to showcase his vast knowledge. 2 men were sent daily to the city to bring and deliver Sharmaji's mail. He was a follower of hydrotherapy and consumed a lot of dried fruits. Another servant was assigned this task. Sharmaji had strictly instructed his mukhtar not to take any free labor from anyone. But he was surprised that no one volunteered for these tasks. Men were sent on rotation each day, yet they saw it as forced labor. The mukhtar often had to be harsh. Sharmaji attributed this laziness to the farmer's obstinacy. Occasionally, he would storm out of his peaceful retreat in anger and showcase his sharp oratory skills. Arranging fodder for Sharmaji's horse was no less of a hassle. Every evening, shouts and scolding could be heard, and it seemed like a commotion was always underway. But Sharmaji pacified himself by thinking, the horse can't go hungry. And the price for the fodder is paid. If there's still a commotion, so be it. It never occurred to him to ask the laborers whether they actually received the money for the fodder. Witnessing all of this behavior, Sharmaji increasingly felt that the villagers were obstinate and dishonest. The grievances about their condition in newspapers and speeches were unjustified. These people deserved the treatment they were getting. Those who harp on about their poverty and wretchedness are not truly acquainted with their real situation. One day, tired of the company of sages, Sharmaji decided to take a walk. As he wandered, he ended up near the threshing fields. Under the mango trees were piles of the farmers' hard-earned grain, and a cloud of chaff swirled in the air. The oxen would occasionally steal a bite of the grain. This was all their hard work, and putting a muzzle on them now would seem ungrateful. The villagers' carpenters, cobblers, washermen, and potters had gathered to collect their annual dues. In one corner, a juggler was beating a drum and displaying his tricks. The village poet, Kaviswara Maharaj, was in high spirits today, demonstrating his unparalleled poetic talent. Sharmaji was pleased by the scene, but amidst the festivities, he noticed several policemen gathered around the piles of grain with clubs in hand. They appeared as out of place as a dead tree in a garden or an off-key note in a beautiful melody. Sharmaji's compassionate gaze was disturbed by the sight of these lurking policemen. He approached one of them. As soon as they saw him, they all straightened their turbans and rushed over. Sharmaji asked, "Why are you sitting here like this?" One policeman replied, "Sir, if we don't stay on top of the tenants, not a single penny will be collected. As soon as the grain enters their homes, they stop listening to reason. They're very stubborn. We stay here day and night, and if we so much as blink, the piles vanish." Sharmaji asked, "How long will you be here?" Another policeman replied, "Sir, we call the traders and have the grain weighed in front of us. Whatever is collected, we deduct the rent and hand over the rest to the tenant." Sharmaji thought to himself, no wonder the condition of these farmers is so poor. They don't even own what they produce. They can't hold on to it and sell it when the time is right. How can I alleviate this suffering? If I show leniency now, how will the rent be collected? Lost in thought, he walked away. The policeman wanted to follow him, but he declined. He didn't like being in crowds. He wandered alone through the village. It was a small village, but there wasn't a trace of cleanliness. A foul odor filled the air from all directions. At some doorsteps, manure was rotting, while elsewhere, piles of mud and garbage were polluting the air. Piles of dung were left near homes for compost, spreading filth while the nutrient-rich components evaporated with the wind and sunlight. The houses and streets were disorganized, ugly, and broken down. There was no system in place to drain the dirty water from the drains, making the stench unbearable. Sharmaji covered his nose with a handkerchief and hurried along, holding his breath. When he couldn't stand it any longer, he ran and, panting, found refuge under the shade of a dense neem tree. He hadn't caught his breath when Babulal approached, greeted him with folded hands, and asked, "Was it a bull?" Sharmaji, still gasping, replied, "It was worse than a bull, a poisonous stench." "Oh, how do these people live in such filth?" Babulal answered, "They don't live, they merely survive." Sharmaji said, "But this place is clean." Babulal replied, "Yes, this part of the village is clean up to the edge." Sharmaji asked, "So why is it so dirty over there?" Babulal responded, "Forgive me for being bold, but may I say something?" Sharmaji laughed, "You should have asked for a pardon. Tell me the truth, what's the reason? One side is so clean, and the other is so filthy." Babulal explained, "That's my section of the village, and that's your section. I take care of my part, but your part is left to the mercy of the servants." Sharmaji said, "Ah, that's the reason. But what exactly do you do?" Babulal replied, "Nothing much, I just keep an eye on things. When I see too much dirt, I clean it up myself. I've instituted a reward for cleanliness, which the house owner receives every month. Please, have a seat." A chair was brought for Sharmaji. He sat down and asked, "Did you just arrive today?" Babulal answered, "Yes, I came because tomorrow is a holiday. You know, I usually spend holidays here." Sharmaji asked, "What's the situation in the city?" Babulal replied, "Same as always, or rather, it's gotten worse. Even the Social Service League members have disappeared. There are corpses lying in the homes of the poor. The markets are closed, and there's no food to be found." Sharmaji exclaimed, "How could I have stayed there in such a firestorm? People seem to think my life is cheap. The day I was leaving, I ran into your lawyer Sahib, and he got all worked up. He started giving me a lecture on patriotism. People who never even think about the country suddenly feel it's their duty to lecture me about patriotism. Do I have a monopoly on patriotism? Everywhere you look, everyone's parading around as a national servant. Even those who spend thousands on their luxuries are counted among the patriots. And here I am, still doing something at least. I'm human, not a god. I do desire wealth. The life I spend writing articles for newspapers, worrying about the nation's welfare, and for that, I consider the respect I receive sufficient. When I go to visit a wealthy man or a lawyer, they may kindly inquire about my well-being. But if, unfortunately, I approach them regarding a donation, they treat me as though I'm the harbinger of death. They behave so rudely that my enthusiasm gets crushed. I endure all these insults, but when it's time to elect the president of a meeting, some lawyer, who has no other qualification than his wealth, is considered suitable for the position. So, brother, let the one who eats the sugar pierce his ears. This is the reward for national service. When I can't even reach that level, why should I waste my life? If I had spent 8 years worshipping Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, I'd be among the great men by now. Just recently, I wrote an article on rural banks with great effort. It took months of preparation, flipping through hundreds of pages of various publications, yet no one bothered to read it. If I had put that much effort into something else, at least I'd have gained some personal benefit. I now realize that no one cares about these things. Respect and fame, these are all slaves to money. Babulal said, "You are absolutely right. But if great men like you take such thoughts to heart, then who will do this work?" Sharmaji replied, "Those who parade around as honorable men or those who are called the fathers of the city will do it. As for me, I will now travel the world and breathe its air." Babulal realized that Sharmaji was not in his usual frame of mind. He changed the subject and asked, "So, how did you like the village? This is your first visit here, isn't it?" Sharmaji sighed, "Yes, and it's only been a dull experience. I've had a few new realizations, though. Some misconceptions have been cleared up. I used to think farmers were very poor and miserable. Now I realize they are obstinate, selfish, and dishonest. They won't listen to reason, but if you deal with them harshly, they'll do whatever you want. They're nothing but animals. And worse still, even for rent collection, you have to sit on their heads. If you give them any leeway, you won't collect a single penny. You'll have to file lawsuits, issue eviction orders, and seize their property. They'll endure all these hardships, but they won't pay on time. These are all new things to me. The sympathy I once had for them is now gone. The elegies written in newspapers about their pitiable state are entirely fabricated. What do you think?" Babulal thoughtfully replied, "I've never had any complaints with them. My experience has been that they are gentle, humble, and grateful. But these qualities don't show on the surface. You have to get to know them and build a relationship. You have to trust them, and then they'll trust you. You might say it's their responsibility to take the first step, and you'd be right, but for centuries, they've been crushed and kicked around so much that their free spirit has almost vanished. They see the landlord as a boogeyman whose job is to swallow them whole. They can't fight back, so they resort to trickery and deceit, which is the only refuge of the weak. But once you've gained their trust, you'll never have any complaints." As Babulal was speaking, a few laborers arrived and quietly dropped off large bundles of hay before leaving without a word. Sharmaji was surprised. This was the same hay that caused so much commotion at his bungalow, yet here it was delivered without anyone noticing. He said, "But how do you go about earning their trust?" Babulal replied, "You are a wise man. It would be bold of me to offer advice. But I've found only one way: help them in their time of need. That's why I learned some basic medicine and carry a small dispensary with me. If they need money, I give them money. If they need food, I give them food, but I don't charge interest. It doesn't harm me, and in other ways, I receive more than enough interest. There are 2 blind women and 2 orphaned girls in the village. I've arranged for their care. It's all done with the village's resources, but I get the credit for it." Just then, a few tenants approached and said, "Brother, take the rent." Sharmaji thought, this is the same rent for which my peons sleep in the threshing field on a cot, not letting the farmers come near their grain piles, and here the rent comes voluntarily. He said, "This can only happen if the landlord lives in the village." Babulal replied, "Exactly. What else? The farmers suffer greatly when the landlord doesn't live in the village. Expecting the steward or servants to treat them well is a mistake. They're only concerned with lining their own pockets. Those farmers who grease their palms are presented to the master as obedient, while those who don't are labeled as rebellious and stubborn. They get bled dry for every little thing. If a farmer wants to thatch his roof, he has to pay the steward. If he wants to put up a fence, he has to bribe the steward. And if he wants to build a shed, he has to give the landlord 10 rupees, with 2 rupees for the steward on top of that. The steward eats free ghee and milk and sometimes even wheat and rice. Landlords bleed the farmers dry, but the stewards are no better. If the landlord takes 3 pounds of ghee for a rupee, the steward demands 18 ounces for his relatives. The farmers are constantly squeezed for every little thing. That's why people are willing to quit a 30 rupee job elsewhere and become a landlord steward for just 8 rupees because a 1 rupee steward makes 1000 extra in a year. The sad part is that as education among landlords increases, the trend of living in cities is also rising. I don't know what will happen to these poor souls in the future. Sharmaji found Babulal's words to be full of insight, but being an educated man, he couldn't accept anything, no matter how true, without logic. He had always considered Babulal a man of ordinary intelligence. It was impossible for this opinion to change suddenly. Moreover, these conversations had the opposite effect. Sharmaji began to feel that Babulal, in his pride over his efficient management, looked down on him and was trying to teach him a lesson. A man who had always tried to enlighten others with his wisdom could not bow down to someone like Babulal. So, as Sharmaji left, his logical mind was busy analyzing Babulal's words. How can I live in the village? Should I give up all my aspirations for life? Should I spend my days chatting with these peasants? I can converse for an hour or so for entertainment, but it's unbearable for me to have them constantly hovering over me. I would lose my mind. Granted, it's my duty to look after them, but I can't destroy my own life for their sake. I can't turn into a Babulal, who can't step outside this village. I have much to do in the world, much fame to achieve. Village life is not only unsuitable for me but also deadly. As he was thinking this, he arrived back at the bungalow, only to find several constables lying in the veranda. The Mukhtar came forward as soon as he saw Sharmaji and said, "Sir, the head constable has arrived with the sub-inspector. I've had cots set up for them in a room. Whenever they come to the area, they stay here. There's no other suitable place in the village. I couldn't tell them there wasn't a room available, so I had your cot set up upstairs." Sharmaji, like many of his fellow nationalists, was strongly opposed to the police. He detested them for their oppression and believed that even if a policeman were dying of thirst, one should not give him water. Upon hearing this news from the Mukhtar, Sharmaji felt a surge of anger. He shot a furious glance at the Mukhtar and stormed off toward the room, thinking, "These scoundrels have turned my house into a hotel. They've taken over." He strode into the veranda with his temper flaring, only to be met by Sub-Inspector Kokila Singh, who emerged from the room, greeted him with folded hands, and said, "I'm so fortunate to see you. You haven't forgotten me, have you?" This was the same Kokila Singh who, 2 years ago, had been an enthusiastic member of the Social Service League. After failing his intermediate exams, he had joined the police force. Sharmaji recognized him immediately. His anger subsided, and trying to smile, he replied, "Forgetting is something big people do. I recognized you from a distance. So, are you posted at this station now?" Kokila Singh replied, "Come, let me introduce you to the head constable." Inside, Head Constable Zulfikar Ali Khan was reclining in a chair, smoking a hookah. He was a large man with an imposing presence. When he saw Sharmaji, he stood up, shook hands, and said, "I've longed for the chance to meet you, sir. Today, fortune has smiled upon me. Please forgive this intrusion." Sharmaji realized today that it was unfair to call policemen uncivilized. Shaking hands, he replied, "What are you saying? This is your home." However, Sharmaji wasn't about to let this opportunity to criticize the police slip by. He turned to Kokila Singh and said, "You left college just last year, but of all jobs, you chose the police." The head constable, catching this jab, sat up straight and said, "Why, sir? Is the police force so bad compared to other departments? Show me one department where bribery isn't rampant, and I'll be your servant for life. You can't work a government job without taking bribes. People call education a noble pursuit, but I've experienced it firsthand. I can no longer believe in anyone's claims of integrity. I can't speak for other departments, but in the police force, anyone who doesn't take bribes is a fool." I've seen a few honest sub-inspectors, but they were always in trouble, either suspended, demoted, or fired. The poor constables and watchmen are men of modest means. How are they supposed to survive? They are our hands and feet, and our reputation depends on them. When they starve, how can we gain a good name? Those who take bribes, eat well, share with others, and keep their superiors happy are considered competent and respected. I've adopted this principle myself, and by God's grace, both my superiors and subordinates are pleased with me. Sharmaji said, "That's exactly why I told Thakur Sahib he shouldn't have joined this department." Zulfikar Ali Khan, now heated, replied, "Joining this department wasn't a favor to anyone. If I were in any other department, I'd still be struggling, or worse, riding around like a pauper on a horse. I speak the truth, whether people like it or not. You can ask anyone, has anyone ever digested ill-gotten gains alone? These new recruits want to pocket everything themselves. They take bribes in secret, and the rest of us are left staring. They want to appear honest to the world, but they don't fear God. If you want to be honest in your heart. Why put on a show of righteousness? These fellows stoop to petty amounts. They don't ask for advice out of pride. Where they could easily get 100 rupees, they settle for 5. They argue with milkmen over prices and quibble with barbers over payments. This isn't leadership, it's pettiness. Sin without pleasure, there's no profit, just free disgrace. I keep my sights on bigger game and leave the small fry for the juniors. I swear, people who give bribes are the biggest fools in the world. Many come to me, offering hundreds of rupees, just to hear me scold their rivals or enemies. These corrupt landlords want to oppress their tenants without any interference from the police. For just that, they offer me hundreds of rupees and bow down in flattery. Showing mercy to such fools would be an act of madness. In this district, my jurisdiction is known as a gold mine. Everyone wants a piece of it. Every day brings a new catch. The landlords are ignorant and reckless, filing cases over the smallest things. I pray to God daily that they remain stuck in this pit of ignorance. I hear some noble soul is proposing a universal education plan. I don't know what's gotten into him. Thankfully, our wise government has rejected it. In this whole district, only your co-landlord has any sense. Nothing works on him, and yet no one is unhappy with him. With sweet words, he wins everyone over. He's ready to die for his tenants, and I swear, if I were him, I'd adopt the same approach. A landlord's duty is to protect his tenants from exploitation. He shouldn't let predators feast on them. Poor farmers have their lives sought after by everyone, and I swear, they don't even enjoy the fruits of their labor. We're the ones who benefit from their hard work. Sure, necessity drives people to do all sorts of things, but the truth is, their condition is truly pitiful. Those who stand up for them deserve to be honored. But for me, the best people are those who help me in my hunts. Sharmaji listened attentively to this nonsense. Being a man of taste, he was fascinated by the mix of compassion and cruelty in Zulfikar's words. It provided him with a curious insight into human emotions. There was no point in trying to respond to such a speech. He simply asked, "Is there some investigation going on, or are you just on patrol?" Zulfikar replied, "Oh no, just patrol. It's harvest season for the farmers, and that's our harvest season too. The lion doesn't catch prey while sitting in his day. He roams the jungle. We're also out hunting. We accuse someone of smuggling, another of buying stolen goods, or drag someone into a case of illicit cohabitation. And if we're lucky enough for a real robbery to happen, we'll be swimming in wealth. The robbers loot and run, but the real looting is done by us. We sweep through the nearby villages, and every night, I pray to God to send us some loot. If fortune doesn't favor us, we create our own. It just takes a little push for a robbery to happen. You must be surprised by my frankness, but if I told you all my tricks, you wouldn't believe me. And yet, I'm counted among the most competent, honest, and diligent sub-inspectors in the district. I arrange fake robberies, arrest fake criminals, but get real convictions. I forge testimonies so skillfully that even the best barristers can't find a way out. Just then, Sharmaji's mail arrived from the city. He stood up and said, "Inspector, your stories are quite entertaining. But now I must take my leave. My mail has arrived, and I need to review it." It was a moonlit night. Sharmaji lay on the open terrace, engrossed in reading a newspaper. Suddenly, he heard some commotion and looked down. What he saw astonished him. Farmers, escorted by constables, were approaching from all directions. Many men were grumbling as they came from the threshing fields. Amidst the grumbling, the sharp scolding of the constables could also be heard. The farmers were being herded into the courtyard in front of the bungalow. Occasionally, the wailing of women could also be heard. Sharmaji was bewildered what was going on. Then the terrifying voice of the head constable rang out, "We won't let anyone off. Everyone must go to the station." Then there was silence. It seemed like the men were whispering amongst themselves. Every now and then, the heart-wrenching cries of the Mukhtar and constables pierced the air. Sharmaji thought he heard the sound of someone being beaten. He could take it no longer. He hurried to the stairway. Peeking into the room, he saw that money was being counted on the table. The head constable asked, "Is this all from such a big village?" The Mukhtar replied, "Don't worry, sir. Once we target the village chiefs, the money will pile up." With that, the Mukhtar called out for several farmers, but no one responded. Then the constable's thunderous voice bellowed, "These people won't listen. Arrest the village chiefs. Put them in handcuffs. I'll have each of them flogged." Upon hearing this despotic order, the constables descended upon the farmers like wolves. The beating began, and the air was filled with the sound of cries. Sharmaji's blood boiled. He had always stood for justice and truth. This cruel display of oppression was unbearable for him. Suddenly, someone cried out, "Mercy, sir. The Mukhtar is getting us beaten for no reason." Trembling with rage, Sharmaji stormed down the stairs. He was determined to thrash the Mukhtar with a whip, but the power of self-restraint, so vital in public service, held him back. He called the Mukhtar over and said, "Munshi ji, what's all this chaos you've stirred up?" The Mukhtar replied, "Sir, the constable is investigating a robbery." Sharmaji said, "Yes, I understand this investigation very well. I've been watching the spectacle for the past hour. Has the investigation concluded, or is there more to come?" The Mukhtar replied, "Sir, the constable knows best. What do I have to do with it?" The head constable was a shrewd man. From the Mukhtar's words, he had assumed that Sharmaji was like other landlords and therefore had no fear. But now he realized his mistake. He saw the fury in Sharmaji's eyes and knew well the power Sharmaji wielded. He approached humbly and said, "Your Mukhtar has misled me, sir. Otherwise, I swear, none of this would have happened. You are a friend of my good friend Babu Kokila Singh, and by extension, I consider you a guardian. But this scoundrel tricked me. I was foolish enough to fall for it. I deeply regret the trouble I've caused you. I humbly request that you dismiss this rascal as soon as possible. He's destroying your estate. Now, with your permission, I'll take my cursed feet away from here. I swear, I'm ashamed to even show my face to you." While this was happening, Babulal was sitting in his courtyard, discussing the incident with some of his men. Shivdeen said, "Brother, why don't you go and talk to the constable? This is outrageous." Babulal replied, "Brother, who am I to interfere in someone else's business? Sharmaji is there. He's wise and will do what's right. This is nothing new. You see for yourself that some commotion is always happening. The Mukhtar profits from it. I don't say anything to Sharmaji about it because he might think I'm complaining out of jealousy." Ramdas said, "Sharmaji is up in the bungalow while the poor people are being beaten. It's unbearable. Those who give bribes are let off, and the rest are being killed. It seems to me that this investigation is just a pretext for extorting money." Babulal replied, "What else would it be? The constable is always on the lookout for such prey. But mark my words, Sharmaji won't let this injustice slide. He's not the kind of man who would witness such cruelty and remain silent. By the way, how much sugarcane did you plant this year?" Ramdas replied, "We planted plenty of cane, but the enemy destroyed most of it. You don't believe it, brother, but I swear, the juice evaporated as if cursed, and we couldn't extract even a handful of molasses. I don't know what kind of spell is cast. Babulal said, all right, this time, follow my advice. Let's see who this great sorcerer is that's stealing the juice from the kettles. There's definitely something fishy going on. Look at all the sugar mills buried in the ground around here. It shows that there used to be plenty of sugarcane. But now, the poor people can't even taste sweetness. Shivdeen said, oh, brother. I remember when these mills used to run all night in Magh and Poos, winter months. There would be a fear-like atmosphere. But ever since this cursed science spread, no one dares go near the sugarcane. Babulal said, God willing, we'll have a good sugarcane crop again. This time, I'll break this spell. Tell me, if we get a good crop, how much jaggery will be made in your patch? Haku laughed and said, brother, how can you even ask? 1,000 rupees worth could be made from just 5 acres. We've planted at least 25 acres of sugarcane in our patch. Even if the worst happens, 2,500 rupees worth of jaggery is guaranteed. Babulal said, then we can expect about 50 rupees to be set aside for cleaning the village. Just then, a young man came running and said, brother, I went to see the investigation. The constable was scolding and beating everyone. Chief Devi said, Mukhtar Sahib, kill me if you want. But I won't give a single penny. I'm ready to go to court, wherever you say. Hearing this, the Mukhtar turned red with anger. He told the 4 constables to beat him thoroughly. Then Devi started crying out in pain. At that very moment, Sharmaji came down from the bungalow and scolded the Mukhtar. The Mukhtar stood there, trembling. The constable quietly called for his horse and left. Everyone's blessing Sharmaji as they leave. Babulal said, I told you before that Sharmaji wouldn't stand for this injustice. Just then, a light appeared in the distance, and Sharmaji, accompanied by a man, approached. Babulal sent the tenants away, placed a chair for Sharmaji, and stepped forward, saying, why did you trouble yourself to come at this hour? You could have called me. Sharmaji humbly replied, how could I call you? All my men were being beaten, their throats were being squeezed, and you didn't come near. I was hoping for your help. Today, my Mukhtar looted the village. What can I say about him? He's just a lowly man. The real shame is that your constable was aiding him. Fortunately, I was there. Babulal said, I'm deeply ashamed that I couldn't assist you in this matter. But the truth is, had I gone there, both the Mukhtar and the constable would have been displeased with me. The Mukhtar has warned me several times not to interfere in his affairs. I've never told you about the condition of the village because I feared you might think I was complaining out of jealousy. This is nothing new. Such incidents happen all the time, not just in this village, but in every village you look at. The root cause of all these problems is the lack of responsible, educated, and ethical men in the villages. The educated landlords in the cities, from whom we expect much, leave all the work to their stewards. And as for the village landlords, they're nothing but illiterate priests. Even those who are somewhat educated lack wisdom due to the poor company they keep. They've memorized a few sections of the law and repeat them like parrots. I assure you, if I had known, I would have alerted you. Sharmaji said, well, this disaster has been averted, but I see that things can't continue like this. It pained me greatly to see my tenants suffering today. My heart keeps telling me that I'm responsible for all these misfortunes. I live off their earnings, and because of them, I ride around in my carriage like a wealthy man. Surely, they have some rights over me too. I can now clearly see my own selfishness. Today, I've fallen in my own eyes. Here I am, claiming to be the savior of the entire nation, sacrificing myself for all of India, yet I'm oblivious to what's happening in my own home. The very people who feed me, I've been so indifferent to their plight. Now I want to eradicate this misfortune completely. I need your help and support in this. Make me your disciple. I've come to you as a supplicant. I don't have the strength to bear this burden alone. My education has turned me into nothing more than a bookworm, teaching me to feed my mind with fantasies. I'm not a man, I'm merely a bundle of rules. Make me a human being. I will stay here from now on, but you'll have to stay too. Any loss you incur, I will bear. Teach me the meaning of a purposeful life. I couldn't find a better teacher than you. Perhaps, by following you, I may finally give meaning to my life. End of the story.
This story was originally written by Premchand, a legendary author of Hindi literature almost 100 years ago. Do let us know if you like the story. If it so happens that you did not like the story, even then, please let us know your choice so that we can find something you would like to listen. If you like the story, tell your friends as well. If you want to enjoy more stories like these from so many other Indian authors, subscribing the channel would make it easy. Bye for now.